Hi, friends. Welcome to Season 2 of Bar of the Conference. I'm your host, Derek Scott III. Today's episode is with Jasmine Smothers. Jasmine is an elder in the North Georgia Annual Conference and lead pastor of Atlanta First UMC, where they, as a worshiping community, are building affordable housing in downtown Atlanta. Jasmine is a bright light and prophetic voice in our denomination. In this interview, we talked about her story growing up the daughter of clergy parents, the road to embracing her call to ministry, and the unique reality of being a young female clergy of color. We spent a great deal of time talking about her experience on the Commission on a Way Forward and her grief at the events of the special session in 2019. But Jasmine has hope for the UMC, and you'll hear how her grief gives way to excitement at what we could be as a denomination. This is a truly inspiring conversation. So grab that notebook, that choice beverage, and let's listen to this great episode with Jasmine Smothers. The Reverend Jasmine Smothers, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm well. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm stoked to spend some time with you, and I'm really grateful that you were willing to join me on the podcast. Just really grateful for your ministry and your leadership. I think you bring so much life into every room that you walk into, and I've watched it happen multiple times in multiple ways, and you're one of the people that I'm cheering for as we're working towards the future of the United Methodist Church. So I'm just really excited to have you and to spend some time and to talk about your journey and your perspective on things.
That's so kind of you. You know, you're one of my favorite people on the planet. So I'm excited to get to chat with you today.
Oh, it's going to be great. So I know bits and pieces about Jasmine's life, but I'd love to just hear sort of the beginning, like how you became United Methodist Christian, God's prevenient grace, working in your life, bringing you into our church. Can you give us sort of the beginnings of the story?
Sure. Funny story. There was a church in Atlanta in the 1980s that was in a transitioning community and decided that they didn't really want Black people to come to the church. And so the bishop closed the church and relaunched it with my parents as the pastors of that church, as the church planters. And so I was the first baby born and baptized in the Great Hoosier Memorial Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I am a cradle Methodist.
Like literally cradle Methodist.
Literally a cradle Methodist and a third generation United Methodist pastor. So it's just a really cool legacy and opportunity that I get to live into each and every day.
Wow. What was that like? I mean, I'm kind of, moving a little quickly here, but I'm just curious, like, what was that like growing up as the daughter of not one, but two clergy folk? Like, what?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot, but it was normal for me, right? Like, everybody else's normal was strange. So my entire life, I've been surrounded by United Methodist pastors. My godfather is a United Methodist pastor. He's retired in the Florida Conference. Mom and dad, a great uncle, and the people who really came alongside our family, many of them are United Methodist pastors. I was the pass-around baby at Gammon Theological Seminary when I was born. And, in that class, realize there's so many people who are leading our church today, and who have led our church in so many faithful and fruitful ways. So, you don't realize that it's kind of strange until you hit middle school, and and you're like, wait a minute, everybody's not going to church when they get off the school bus. Like, everybody's not eating dinner at church on Wednesday nights. Everybody's not trying to figure out whose church they're going to on Sunday morning. And when you go to the movies with your friends, mom and dad don't know exactly where you were, what movie you saw, who you were with, who you were sitting next to, because the community of saints has made it clear that they are the village. So, and then, my mom and dad have had an incredible ministry, and are known far and wide across the connection. And so you also get in this place where you feel like you need to live up to them, right? So one of the best things that happened for me, and I'm throwing this out for other clergy families, my parents allowed me to go to boarding school, and in Connecticut, which was very unusual in our community, and a lot of pushback from my parents early on, because it was so far out of the norm, right? And but it ended up being the best thing for me, because I got to see a different side of life, a different way of life. I got an exceptional education, not just in book education, but in life education, and exposure to things and to people that I would not have gotten. And also, I got to do everything I wanted to do without having to be on the school bus from 6:30 in the morning and getting home at 8:30 at night, or getting off the school bus and going to church, because there weren't any other options. Like, I mean, that was the thing. And so it has been quite a spectacular journey. The old folks would say, I wouldn't take anything from my journey now. And I'm living in that space now, that every single twist and turn God has poured in, and made those parts of the journey, both good and difficult, fruitful, and helped me to learn something there and to become the person that I am today.
Wow. So Jasmine, when did faith become real for you? When did it not just become the faith that you were raised in, but when did it become the faith that you owned for yourself?
I think it's in some way always been my own faith. People tell me stories all the time that when I was little, after worship, I would stand up on the pews and preach back the sermon and sing back the songs to my created congregation. And some of my earliest memories are singing the songs of faith with my great aunt, and in the car with my parents. And I just can't remember that there was a moment that it just became my own faith. Now, here's what I do remember. The North Georgia Conference had a spectacular, I feel like I'm using that word a lot today, which is weird because that's not a word I use, but had a really incredible and impactful ministry that was called a Youth Annual Conference. And it was held at one of our colleges, one of our United Methodist colleges in North Georgia, and youth from all over the conference came. And it was sort of even a mirror to annual conference. And it was held before annual conference, and the youth would prepare their legislation for annual conference. And we had this incredible, and still today have this incredible youth delegation to annual conference each year that kind of came out of this. Thanks to people like Mike Selleck and Margaret Freeman and other folks who just really leaned in with us. But we had youth leaders at some of our Black congregations who insisted that we be involved in conference level youth ministry. And even if it meant that 5 churches got on the same bus, had the same chaperones, and we were 5 individual churches, but we functioned as one youth group for the purpose of the conference retreats and the, and youth annual conference. And man, it was a gift to me. And the one thing that I miss about youth annual conference was that and I miss about annual conference is that it was so rooted in worship. I mean, it started with worship. There was midday worship. There was evening worship. And the preachers were youth and young adults. And gosh, they were so great. And I remember being there and saying, okay, God, I get this thing. I'm in on my own now. I'm in for myself now. I'm in on faith. And that pivot point for me was, I think before I was in on the church, right? Because church was what I knew. Church is my family. Church is everything. And at that point, it was a shift from I'm in on the church to I'm in on God. And I'm in on my own faith. And that was a shift that really served me well going forward. I have a deep and abiding love for the church. I have a deep and abiding love for the Church Universal. I have a deep and abiding love for the United Methodist Church. I have a deep and abiding love for the church that I get to serve right now, the Atlanta First United Methodist Church. And I have even more than that. People who really know me will tell you, Jasmine loves God and the city of Atlanta.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find something that she loves more than her godchildren, her family, her God, and the city of Atlanta. And it really is like my guiding point. And I credit that shift to Youth Annual Conference, and to really the deep attention that was paid not only to our ability to move around in the church. I mean, they taught us Robert's Rules of Order and how to do petitions and legislation and how the structure of the church is. We work together in CCYM and all this. But what they also taught us was that worship was everything, and that nothing works, functions, or goes without the worship of God. And so many of those sermons that I heard from my peers were just so transformational and grounding, in a way that has carried me through.
What a testimony. I'm guessing it was in that space that you discerned your call to ministry.
Yeah, I stopped running from it too. Yeah, I mean, it was, I clearly discerned my call to ministry there, but I didn't want anybody to know about it because I didn't want it to be a thing. Yeah. I spent most of my childhood and adolescence saying the last thing I'm going to do is be a preacher. And I was still saying that when I was about to graduate from college. And that same youth group, that same young adult group, we had a reunion revival and brought back our children and youth pastor from back in the day, whom this world gets to now call the president dean of Gammon Theological Seminary, the Reverend Dr. Candace Lewis.
Yeah.
And she preached a sermon that I will never forget on Isaiah 6, I saw the Lord. And she painted a picture of the train in the temple and the trumpets and the seraphim and the call of God, especially when you feel ill-equipped, that just left me stupefied. And I was supposed to take the LSAT the next day. And I went home and I heard God clearly say, that's not what I told you to do. And I thought I had jumped God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna get out of this thing, right? And I'm in this house by myself, and I am literally hearing the voice of God say, "That's not what I told you to do." And I'm looking around like, "Whoa, what is happening here?" And the Lord said very clearly, Jasmine, you have watched as people have run from their call to ministry. So you know what it cost. You also know what it costs to answer the call to ministry. You can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can go ahead and do this now, or you can come back to it later, but you're going to do it. So it's up to you. What are you going to do?
Wow. And
needless to say, I did not go take the LSAT the next day. And once I got myself together, I called my mom and dad and I was like, I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to law school. They're like, it's time. And the rest is history. So.
Wow. So you discern your call to ministry and you then go to seminary, I guess.
So I went to Candler School of Theology. Now, mind you, this is late in the game. It's May because graduation is around the corner. So maybe it's April. And so I start looking up online. I know I don't want to leave Atlanta because I had just come back, from boarding school and then college. And I just, didn't want to leave Atlanta. And so that meant it was really Gammon or Emory, Candler. And I struggled with that decision because my parents are proud graduates of the School of the Prophets, Gammon Theological Seminary. And I feel like in some ways Gammon helped raise me. But I felt a strong call to go to Candler and sat down and we discussed it as a family. And I was blessed, deeply blessed by their response that I should go where God is leading. And that, it would be okay, that I get to live my own life, right? Which preachers, please tell your children that they get to live their own life. Because it is deeply freeing, and it's probably something you don't think you have to say to them, but say it to them earlier rather than later, because it will free them to be who God has created them to be, and to not try to create themselves in your image, because you are larger than life, and they always see you on a pulpit. They always see you on a pedestal. They always see you up. And that does something to kids. So tell them early that they are allowed to live their own life, and that they are allowed to do and to be who God has called them to be. And so, yeah, I went to Candler, and it was a fantastic experience. And it was a great, I'd been to Spelman College for undergrad. So, it was vastly different from Spelman and the HBCU experience, but also just deeply, deeply freeing as well.
So, Jasmine, you are ordained in the North Georgia Conference, a young Black clergy woman. I am. It's been rainbows and butterflies the whole way.
Okay.
So, what has been the joy of being a young Black clergy woman in North Georgia, and what has been the not joy in that for you?
I'm glad you added that "for you" part, because I think my experience in some ways has been different from some of my other sisters. I've always been in cross-racial appointments. And there are a million reasons for that. While I was actually still in college, I was hired by a predominantly Anglo church as their youth pastor. And then I went to serve Atlanta First as their associate. Then I went on the conference staff as like a church consultant. And then back to Atlanta First as the senior pastor. And that is a very unusual journey. Some people like to use the word trajectory, but I think that's kind of counter to who we say we are as Methodists and the appointive process and all that. But a very unusual journey. So I think it's hard for me to speak to anybody else's experience but my own. So when I talk about joys of being a Black clergy woman, I just want to talk about the joys of being a Black clergy woman in Jasmine's skin. So one of the joys is community, right? One thing Black women are going to do is reach out to Black women. And if they don't, something's wrong. Something's really, really wrong. Because in this world that we live in, Black women only have Black women. That's all we got. And I went to the place for Black women, Spelman College, right? And I joke that Spelman's a sorority in itself because it's a deep sisterhood.
I have heard that.
One of the joys of being here in North Georgia is there are a bunch of us who are Spelman and Candler grads, all different ages, all different years. But I either have the second longest tenure or the longest tenure in that group. And we just understand each other in a way that a text message can go out and it'll just be like, oh, and all the sisters show up. And that has been a gift, because when you serve in cross-racial appointments, you're sort of like automatically, in a way, divorced from all the communities, right? I don't know why we have allowed this to happen in our conferences, in our churches, but I do think that this is a universal experience, that if you are a Black person serving a predominantly Anglo church, or even a multi-ethnic church, the Black church kind of looks at you like, are you still one of us? We're not sure. And then the white church looks at you like, why are you in our space? And so you really live between these places of community, and you're just kind of out there by yourself. It is, the joy of that is that you get to form your own community. And sometimes you are so tired that you can't, right? Because you don't have a safe space to just, but when you can form your own community, you get to form a community that is life-giving, hopefully non-toxic, and a community that's really committed to seeing things in different ways. So, because you no longer exist in a binary world.
Right.
And a binary world no longer exists to you. So you really begin to struggle with the us and them language, because you are both us and them at the same time, and you have to be to survive. And you may not feel like us, or you may not feel like them, but your race dictates that you are us, and your place dictates that you are them. And you really have to learn how to live in a non-binary world.
Yeah.
I count that both as a joy and a challenge.
Yeah.
Because I'm a part of a generation that wasn't raised in a binary world. We were always in integrated schools. You know, we were always, we've never really been in classrooms that were segregated. We've really never been in boardrooms that were segregated. Now, they may not look like we'd like them to look ideally, but we've always had to be in a place where there were lots of different kinds of people. And I know that a lot of young people struggle with church because they have to kind of decide who they're going to be with on Sunday morning, instead of having an array of multi-ethnic, multi-social economic, multi-generational, multi churches that they can step in and say, hey, I belong here too. And I belong here too. And I belong here too. And, you know, we're so busy working on other things that we don't realize that the primary issue is that I don't want to worship in a segregated space.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do segregated worship. Like, I like all the music. Like, I like all the things, right? And we spent so much time and money like on trying to get young people in the church, but we didn't actually take care of the thing that keeps the young people out of the church.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm going on a tangent from the.
No, it's good. It's good.
But that's my thing. Like, I get really, really fired up about that, because people walk into my church or they worship with us online. They really love to worship with us online, and instead of coming in person. But almost all the children in our children's ministry are biracial, multicultural. They're different kinds of faith in the family, like mom might be Catholic, dad might be Protestant, dad might be Jewish, mom might be Christian. And most of the children who are a part of our church live in a world that is non-binary, and helping their families find a church that looks like them is darn near impossible. And we're in the big city of Atlanta, right? So I can't imagine what it's like in other places. So we've gotten really committed to being that kind of church where not just everybody is welcome, but everybody belongs. And it's hard work. It is hard work. There is never a dull moment. And there is never sort of a level playing field, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because you are a Black woman, there are always people who are going to side eye you, who are going to look at you like, what are you doing here? Who walk up to my lay leader, who is an older white male, and say, you're the pastor, right? Let me talk to the pastor. And he's like, you actually just walked right over her. But the joy of that is that I get invited into spaces that other people don't get invited into, because in some way there are other people who feel like Black women are much safer than anybody else who they could invite in their space and to be their pastor. So, gosh, there is a lot of joy. You know what? I have to tell you, the joy for me in the last few years has been seeing how many young Black females the North Georgia Conference is ordaining. It was not that way when I came through in 2008. Okay, just 2008. And I was commissioned in 2008. It wasn't that way. In fact, I was the only Black female in my commissioning class. And then I was joined by 2 others in our ordination class, but I was it in our commissioning class. That meant I was it in our residency group. I was it on our mission trip. I was it. Like, you have no peers. And but now, gosh, the last 5 years or so, just looking at all of these beautifully gifted, incredibly anointed, called women of God who happen to be Black females, gosh, I mean, it's just like, yeah, this is joy. Like, this is what I've worked for and through. And man, this makes the hard days worth it. And just being able to see them flourish. I don't even know how to explain how that feels. To go from the only to the old head. And there's still not enough. Right. And then this past year, something happened in North Georgia that I really thought would never happen. We got an African-American female bishop. Yeah. And I mean, she is changing the game in all the best ways. Wow. And I get emotional. I tear up because I didn't know that I would see that in the conference that I love, with the people that I love, and with the people that I struggle with, that we would get to this point. Yeah. I knew we would, I think we have what? We have a great number of the most number ever of active Black females on the Council of Bishops.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there are still conferences that prefer they not be assigned there.
Right.
But man, have you seen what they are doing? The gift that they have been to the conferences to which they are assigned. I mean, it's mind blowing. Black women are magic, man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And when I say magic, I don't mean in the traditional like magician, juju magic kind of way. I mean like Black girl magic in God broke the mold when he made these women.
Yeah.
And they are can't nobody tell me that they're not called for such a time as this.
Say that. Mm-hmm. Jasmine, you've already talked a little bit about Atlanta First and the life of that congregation. I know that you all are doing some incredibly innovative, but also justice-oriented work as a congregation. Really trying to, from where I'm sitting, really trying to actually serve the community that you're in. I'd love to hear just a little bit of what's happening at Atlanta First and how God's moving in that space.
Atlanta First is an incredible community. It is the first Protestant church in the city of Atlanta, and it helped launch most other denominations in the city of Atlanta. Its current location is its third location, but it is Wesley's Chapel in Gone with the Wind. And Margaret Mitchell's family still is involved in the life of the church. They're still members of the church. And it is it is the delineation. The physical plant is the delineator between downtown and midtown. It also has had some bumps in the road. It has been in decline for a long time, 40 plus years. Its senior pastor was one of the only senior pastors of the big steeple churches on Peachtree Street that did not sign the minister's manifesto to desegregate churches in the 60s. And that's something that the congregation does not like to talk about. And when Sherman burned Atlanta, its bell was the only bell that was preserved, and it rings every Sunday morning. The church is 176 years old, and it has been home to some of Atlanta's greatest leaders, like the founders of Coca-Cola. Grady Hospital is our huge public hospital here. The Grady's have been along. The church has launched so many nonprofits and helped nonprofits launch that do so much good in the city, and that really care for the city in ways that are hard to come by, like trying to prevent homelessness, right? Midtown Assistance Center is a co-op that was launched through Atlanta First and the other downtown, midtown churches. And it exists to prevent homelessness in the city. Most everything else exists to make sure you have groceries after you're homeless, right? So it has, in its own way, been a really innovative place of worship and service through its entire history. And in other ways, just like every other congregation, right, it has had places where it really needs to grow and to serve. So fast forward to 2008, I was appointed as the associate there, got to work alongside an incredible staff and a church planter who began to blow some new life into the church. But what we learned was, in order to be an anti-racist church, if I can say, in order to be a church that serves a city that is as diverse and as complex as Atlanta, in order to be a church that exists for its community and not for itself, we had to do some really hard work around DNA. And so we spent the first few years doing that hard work. And that meant that some people no longer felt comfortable in the church of their birth. To be honest, when I showed up, some people were like, oh, no, this is not my church anymore. And other people were like, this is awesome. Like, you know, so you take the good with the bad. Yeah. And then the 2020 elections happened, and that was really hard. That was really hard because we had this church that was becoming really diverse, and this church that was becoming really community oriented, that then sort of showed some of its old DNA. And that was really hurtful and painful and really difficult to lead through. So I guess that was 2016 elections, not 2020. Yeah, because then the pandemic hit. And it hits a community like Atlanta First really hard because you have so many people who are food vulnerable, housing vulnerable, transient, and it's really hard to keep up with those folks, right? And so you're torn. Do I spend the bulk of my time trying to keep up with the folks that I know they're going to be there when I get to them? Or do I pour into my time trying to keep up with these folks who I know are vulnerable, who I know don't have a stable place to live, who I know may not be getting anything to eat, who I know are really struggling with mental health, and this is going to set that off. And the congregation usually has no idea about who these people are. I mean, when our buddy Tony walks in off the street, everybody knows Tony's homeless, right? But there's some people who come to church who you don't realize they can't read, right? You don't realize that when they came in the door, they slid into the food pantry to get some crackers because that's the only thing they're going to eat today, because they don't want to tell you that they don't have any money for groceries, right? And nobody really knows that. But when you're their pastor, it's your responsibility to know those things. And then, you really struggle to know how to manage all of that at the same time. So I think it was before the pandemic, but really leaning into how are we going to really be the church for this community? And we did at General Conference 2019, I started my speech talking about the I Dream a Church campaign that was very active when I was a youth. And so we did an I Dream a Church series right before the pandemic, and had folks talk about, what they believed that God was saying to them about the future of the church, and specifically the future of the church at Atlanta First. And over and over and over again, people's dream cards came back, and they said, how do we help those who are hungry? How do we help those who are on the margins? How do we help those who are need housing? How do we help folks get jobs? It was all about how do we serve our community, and that made my little pastor heart so proud. And so the leadership team got together and said, okay, how can we make the biggest impact with the most amount of people with the resources that God has given us right now? And that came down to sacrificing some things on our side so that we could make some new partnerships and provide affordable, attainable workforce and market rate housing right on the property of the church at the delineator of Midtown and downtown Atlanta. Okay. So that is where we have really focused our energy to really develop and create a place, a campus, the 360 Peachtree Street campus, that is for all of God's people. And that is a place, sort of a one-stop shop, live, work, play, worship, right? Live, work, play, worship, development, where we can literally do the work of interrupting the generational poverty, interrupting the school to prison pipeline, getting children out of their cars and into homes, so that they can actually pay attention when they get to school. And they don't feel like they need to have a job at 12 years old with the local drug dealer so that they can get out of their car and have a place to live. This stuff is real. And it's happening every day. And babies are raising themselves because things are that hard, right? And so here we are, dead smack in the middle of the city that's too busy to hate, the Black Mecca in the South, and the city that has so many well working, well doing, well meaning people in it, and African Americans in it, but these people keep coming to the city and they're not realizing the Atlanta dream, right? Because man, it's not affordable to live in Atlanta anymore. And we were putting so much money into putting people on the bus to send them back to where they came from, that we were like, if we put this money into housing, services, teaching folks how to do the things that you don't learn if you've grown up on the streets, or if your mom has been at work your entire life just trying to keep the lights on, if we can do this, then maybe we won't have to buy so many bus tickets back to wherever and send them back to pretty much a terrible situation that they were in, but better than living on the streets of Atlanta. So I am immensely proud of the Atlanta First United Methodist congregation and how it has just really opened itself to being the city's church, opened itself to being a place of service, and really opened itself to utilizing the gifts that God has given them over the last 176 years to make this project come to fruition.
Wow.
So when it's all said and done, there'll be 2 towers that end up having 300 units. Studio apartments, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. And these will be the first 3 bedrooms in downtown Atlanta on Peachtree Street. So that means that now families can live downtown and they don't have to spend all their money commuting, right? And we're so excited about the potential that this has to transform the community, because after all, The mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And I, just like I tell my Bible study every week, this is not about gaining information, right? This is not about who can recite the most Bible verses. It's about behavior. It's about transformation of behavior. If you are the same hateful person that you were 20 years ago and you've been sitting on a pew every Sunday of those 20 years, something is not right. Okay. This relationship with Jesus Christ and the work of the church is about transformation. And it's not just about personal transformation. It's about communal and community transformation so that everybody is doing better. Everybody gets a chance to live this abundant life that Jesus Christ has taught us about, and that Jesus Christ came to give us, and that we are abdicating over and over and over again.
Amen. Wow.
I could harp on that all day, but
oh yeah, I love it. Let's take a quick break. And so you were a part of the commission on the way forward. It was a 32-member group. Am I remember that correctly?
I think so.
Yeah. I have lots of, yeah. I mean, I have lots of questions about your participation on the commission. And we have lots of things that we can talk about as the results of that work. But I'm wondering why you said yes to it. Why'd you say yes to being on the commission?
Because my bishop asked me. If I'm honest. So I had just been appointed to Atlanta First. And in June of that year. And my bishop was retiring. We were getting a new bishop in September. And he was like, I want you to do this commission on the way forward. And I was like, okay. And I mean, you have a lot of hesitation about that. Yes, because you don't really get a lot of information. And you're just starting in this church that you know is going to be a huge place of service and a huge undertaking. And I wasn't expecting it at all. But I mean, I probably could have said no. Because our bishop at the time, he was gracious like that. He would let you say no. But he would be really clear. You can say no to this. You cannot say no to that. And I appreciate clarity.
Yeah.
So, but it also kind of intrigued me. Just the whole notion that we might be able to bring some kind of resolution to a fight that's really been going on since the 70s and for some people the 60s. Because remember, I told you I love the church. I knew that there were going to be people in the room who were smarter than me, who had been working on legislation around this for a long time, who had a lot more at stake than I had at stake, and who really had a vision for the future of the church. And at some point, I think I thought that the commission on the way forward was to really sort of help envision a next generation United Methodist Church. And in many ways, that's not what it ended up being.
Right.
But it did allow us to kind of voice back to I Dream of Church, right? Voice our dreams and visions for the future of the church in that place in a way that, you know, people started doing the parking lot, but that never really gets to the real meeting where action is taken. So I guess I said yes because I have been for a long time, like through the Young People's Ministry, Division on Young People's Ministry, even before we had the Division on Young People's Ministry, when it was just discipleship, and through 2 quads on the ministry study, you know, I'd really thought a lot about, man, what could the future of the church be? And what could happen if we really had an opportunity to dream about a next generation church?
So what was it like in the room with your colleagues? And
it depends on what room we were in. I think at the very beginning there was healthy hope and healthy cynicism. That there have been people who had worked on this thing. We got this figured out, and then they called for this commission, and we had this figured out, and they thought, okay, we'll just bring what we figured out and work on that. And then there were people who are like, we're never going to figure this out. Why are we in this room? And then there were people who were like, let's just see what God wants to do. And those are my kind of people. So I gravitated very early to those kind of people who seemed to not be agenda driven, but to be spirit driven, and were genuinely concerned with both faith and church. And I know a lot of people don't separate them, but I do, because in my generation, they are very different. And I think that's an important distinction for people to hear, that church and faith are not the same thing.
Yeah.
But these folks had a real love for God and a real love for the church. And they really wanted to be spirit driven to see what God would do. Now, that original sense of all of those different things morphed over time as we tried our best to work together. And there were some places where we figured out really early on that there was going to be no movement, that we would not be able to come to. I think the original design for the commission was that there would be one report, and that we would all agree that this was the way forward. And that is not at all what happened.
Right.
There were 3 reports and several minority reports. And that was frustrating. It was really frustrating. And it was disappointing that we had been tasked with something that we really couldn't achieve. And, you know, I'm a goal-oriented, get it done kind of person. I'm a 1 on the Enneagram. And, you know, that was a really hard realization when we got to the point that there are people in this room that I have loved and I have respected, that are not here for the same reason that I'm here. And there are people in this room who are beyond this already, and they have a totally different goal than the goal that was stated for the commission. that was heartbreaking. And to know that there were people that I loved, looked up to, considered friends, and collaborative partners who turned out not to be that. But then I also met some people who I had not had the benefit of knowing before. I had heard of Alice Williams, the amazing, incredible Alice Williams, who is your co-lay leader in Florida. She'd done a presentation for us at a event that Florida and North Georgia and Tennessee hosted together, MLab. I kind of adored her from afar during that. And then I ended up getting to sit down next to her, and I was just mind blown. Like, Alice Williams is one of those people you sit down in her presence and you know you're never going to be the same.
Exactly. Exactly.
And she calls you to your highest place, right? Your highest place of praise, your highest place of devotion to God, your highest place of love for people. And she makes you want to be a better person than you are. And so there was that gift, right? There was the gift of Alice, and now Bishop Tom Berlin, and I mean, so many others. Julie Hager Love. I mean, just these people who are really there because they love God and love the church. And then, you know, our moderators I would not have wanted their job ever in life, because with so many strong personalities in the room who are used to being, I mean, everybody in that room is used to being in charge. Everybody in that room is used to being a leader. Everybody in that room knows how to run a meeting. Everybody in that room knows the games that get played in United Methodist meetings. I mean, everybody in that room is a high level, effective leader, and they have all come with a purpose and a plan. And then you've got these three bishops who are supposed to be moderating this conversation. God bless them.
Good luck. Yeah.
And God bless them that anything got done at all. Right. I mean, I just can't imagine that they didn't sometimes feel like they were trying to like shoot ants in a barrel or something. It's just crazy all the time. Like, I think in the room, though, we did our best to always be respectful of each other. And that's one takeaway that I can say. I have been in rooms where we have not been respectful of each other, and we have not even tried to be respectful of each other. And in this room, there was permission to be respectful, and expectation to be respectful, and expectation to learn what we didn't know, and to assume that there was something that we did not know. And then there was also permission to call somebody out if we were not being respectful. There was a covenant that we were held accountable to. And that was different, because usually there's a covenant and nobody is ever held accountable to it. But we were held accountable to that covenant. People outside the room did not abide by the covenant. And that was very hurtful and very harmful. It made the commission look suspicious, instead of allowing us to do our work, and do it in a way where we could try to trust each other. And I think at the end of the day, in the room, there was a sense of, well, we've done the best we can with what we had for such a time as this. And there was some sense of hope that the majority report, the one church plan, would pass. It was an expectation. from the group. But there was also an expectation that all the other plans would get the same airtime. And I think that's when we knew that this was going to be a bumpier ride than anticipated.
Jasmine, we know that the outcome of the special session of 2019 was the passage of the traditional plan, which was not the majority report, was not the plan endorsed by the Council of Bishops, but that's the plan that passed, that by the simple majority. Looking back on the commission's work, is there anything you wish you had done differently? And I'll ask that, anything you wish you had done differently individually, and then the follow-up, anything you wish the commission as a whole might have done differently.
I'd step back even a little bit further. I think that the way the commission was named and created could have been done differently, and could have been done in a way that fostered a little bit of trust in the church. I mean, it sort of started under a cloud of secrecy for some people. I'm not sure I ever felt that, but I was in the room, right? But and our first 2 meetings were spent building relationships, and people took the lack of rapport after the first 2 meetings as they're trying to keep stuff from us. And then there was media that was not helpful to that. That just kind of played into that sense of rumor. So I just kind of feel like we were sunk from the beginning because the church didn't buy in. And so at the very beginning, I mean, there are bishops that didn't buy in. So at the very beginning, from the very beginning, it was a very hard operation.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever came back from that. So by the time we got to General Conference, there was zero trust and zero buy-in because of how it started. Yeah. And I don't think there's anything we could have done to turn that around after those news reports were published. I think maybe I was a little Pollyanna-ish about the situation. I tend to be an optimist. And I mean, on my social media accounts, my bio is a quote, right? Is a quote that says, "Now that we've exhausted all the possibilities, let's get started." And that's just kind of the way, like, I live my life. Tell me something's impossible. Let's go do it. Let's see what God is going to do, right? Just nothing is impossible with God. And that's how I approach the commission as well. Like, well, let's just do it, you know? And I think I really underestimated the forces that were at work to make sure that we didn't do it. And really educating the people of God about spiritual warfare. I mean, it is in evil's best interest for the church not to be united, for the church not to function well, for the church to get distracted from its mission. And we allowed that to happen because we did not do any education around spiritual, the forces of spiritual wickedness, right?
Wow.
We say that it's biblical, it's in our membership vows and our baptismal vows, but I'm not sure we understand what that means and how evil can work in our world, even with and through well-meaning people, to try to destroy what is God's. Now, I say try to destroy, because you can't destroy what is God's. You don't have that much power. And you think you can, but just wait and see. Buckle up, Buttercup, because everything I know about the God that I serve, everything that I read in the Bible, everything that I've heard from the elders, everything that I've seen with my own two eyes says, at the end of the day, God wins, period. And whatever your motive was, whether good, bad, or indifferent, it is God's will that wins.
Yeah.
It may take a while. Here in the beautiful state of Georgia, we are seeing some things in motion that were set up in the 40s, in the 50s, and the 60s, and it has taken this long for them to come back around. But good Lord, the Lord is having the last word here.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I've told my church. I'm like, you can't destroy what is God's. You can't. You don't have that power. And so we're just going to do our best to follow the will of God as we discern and understand it. And other people are going to do that too. And we're going to let them do what they do. And we are going to do our best to call out what is evil, what is spiritual wickedness, what is spiritual immaturity, what is spiritual maturity, what is spiritual warfare, and what is a blessing from God. We're going to do our best to keep those things straight. And if we can keep those things straight, we'll continue to move in the will of God. And wherever God leads us, that's where we will follow.
Yeah.
And I wish I had been stronger in that conviction in the moment in those rooms of the commission.
Yeah.
But when you're in something, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're working so hard toward the task and trying to ignore the sabotage that's going on. You don't have any other energy. I mean, when we came home from those meetings, we slept for days.
Yeah.
I mean, and some of us didn't have the privilege of sleeping for days, but you would just drag and drag and drag. It was like it took every ounce of energy that you had to be present.
My God.
And I don't mean to say that in a bad way, because sometimes that energy was expended in the best way. And you still like, I need a nap for a very long time.
Yeah. It's so real.
Yeah.
So lots has happened since that special session. And I'm curious of your personal take, and it may be similar to some of the stuff you've already said, but the passing of the traditional plan and the annual conference season in the U.S. that came after that was a response to that, to the passing of the traditional plan. And then COVID, protocol gets, sort of put in front of us, and then COVID, postponing General Conference many times, the launch of the GMC, just so many different things that's happened. What's your personal feeling of this season in the United Methodist Church right now? Like, how are you feeling? And North Georgia has experienced some very specific events related to all of this. What has been your thought process these last few years around the United Methodist Church?
Yeah. So this is probably the first time I've talked about this stuff in a long time, because I just stopped talking about it and sort of retreated because it was all consuming.
Yeah.
And there was significant grief for me personally after the 2019 special session. It was, I don't know how you talk about being in that room without viscerally feeling the harm that was done, the mean and underhanded situations that were taking place. And just how people fail to recognize when something is about power and not about God. And for a long time, I lost a lot of respect for people that I had respected. And I think now I'm seeing my colleagues really begin to understand the impact of the Commission on the Way Forward, the outcome of GC 2019, the protocol, COVID, and man, it's too late.
Yeah.
And it's like, we tried to tell you. But we have so much distrust in our system. When we said that we didn't do anything at that meeting, but try to learn each other, that's really all we did at that meeting. We were telling you the truth. Nobody was lying. So gosh. And I think in some ways I'm still grieving. I grieve for a church that could have been. Every time we say the prayer of confession, which is over communion, which is once a month at our church and sometimes more. Every time I say the words, we have failed to be an obedient church.
Yeah.
I think of the 2019 session and it breaks my heart all over again. And so at this point, I think that we need, and this is probably maybe an unpopular opinion because of the polity of the church and the very real financial impact and the very real toll on families and communities. We will have whole communities in North Georgia that do not have a United Methodist congregation in them, and whole churches in North Georgia where the closest United Methodist sister or brother congregation to them will be 30, 40, 50 minutes away. And that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because the United Methodist Church at its root, and when it really understands its history and its theology, is liberating for the world today. And instead, we're pushing people away in all the different expressions. And so I want this process of disaffiliation to be done with. Everybody go to your house and stop messing around in mine. Because that's about to send me over the edge. You already know you're going to a different house, so why are you messing around in mine? That integrity still matters here, people. We still have to answer to God. And obviously we have a different idea of who God is in the world. If you're acting like that. But I don't know. I have a lot of reflections, and as you can tell, a lot of feelings about this season in the life of the church. But what I'm really excited about is what we can be.
Mm-hmm.
And while at the same time I'm grieving for what we could have been,
Mm-hmm.
I am excited for what we can be now.
Yeah.
And for who we can be, and really mostly to whom we can be. So I'm really excited about joining with others with God, to be the church that we can be.
Yeah.
And that we really have been struggling to be. Maybe for our entire history.
So, Jasmine, there's just so many things that I want to ask you, but for sake of time, let me just go in and on this. Like, we've got General Conference coming up in April, May of 2024. So much is going to be before the General Conference. But what do you think General Conference 2024 needs to be about?
Forgetting what is behind, press on. If we spend all our time moving backwards, if we spend all our time lamenting over disaffiliation, if we spend all our time talking about what we don't have, what we used to have, what we should have, we are sunk. However, if we choose to take care of the things that will continue to pull us backwards, don't forget, we still got a traditional plan that is enacted in this church that needs to be cared for. And if we look forward to what can be outside of the box of what is, then I think we have a fighting chance. UMC Next did some incredible work on hope and vision and what the church might look like moving forward. That is in the DCA for General Conference, is the next generation legislation. And it's all about restructuring the church, reforming the church in deep and abiding ways, caring for all those pieces of yarn that we just talked about, and making sure that it will pass the muster of judicial council. And most of it, 99% of it, without constitutional amendments. But then embedded in it, there is work to look at the entire Constitution, pull what is good and work on what could be more Christ-like as we go forward.
Yeah. Jasmine, do you have hope for the United Methodist Church going forward?
Oh, I couldn't be a part of the United Methodist Church if I didn't have hope for it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm listening to folks in other denominations who have had disaffiliations and disillusions and breakups, whatever you want to call it. And I'm listening to them on the other side talk about how people are coming back, how it caused them to get really clear about what was important. And in that way, they were able to get healthier as a church. To talk about the self reflection that it has caused, that it otherwise would not have caused in our clergy and in our lay people. And to sort of call forth out of people a real defiance toward mission and ministry. Like, oh, you're going to do this? Okay, so we're going to do what we do even better.
Mm.
We fed 100 people last year. We're going to feed 200 people this
Come
year.
on. Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And I love that. I'm here for all of that, right? What I am here for is people being in a relationship with Jesus Christ in which they get to experience the abundant life that we have been promised right here and right now. And so we don't have to say, well, when I get to heaven, I guess I will experience Christ's abundant life. When Jesus came so that we can have life and have it in abundance right here where we are. So that's what I'm here for. So if it takes a little bit of moving around, of divorcing, of disaffiliating, of really taking inventory of what's important, then good, because I want to get back to being the church of Jesus Christ. I want to get back to doing the work of transformation in community. I want there to be no homeless people who sleep on the front steps of Atlanta First United Methodist Church. That's what I care about. And that's where I see the hope of the United Methodist Church, because the United Methodist Church is uniquely situated to do that in ways that are just mind-blowing, that we have not even tapped into. And I believe the United Methodist Church is uniquely situated to educate children in ways that can interrupt generational poverty and interrupt the school to prison pipeline. I believe the United Methodist Church can make sure that no one is illiterate. I believe the United Methodist Church can help people find jobs and skills that they never imagined that they would be able to do. I believe that through the power of the Holy Spirit, the United Methodist Church can do anything but fail if we stick to the mission and the ministry and let all the other junk that we have allowed to become a distraction, let it go and get back to doing the work and be at the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. So yes, I have a great deal of hope for the United Methodist Church right here and right now and into the future.
Reverend Jasmine Smothers, I know you officially did not graduate from the School of the Prophets, but good God, it is in you. And you are a gift to the church, Jasmine, and I'm grateful for the spaces that you are able to shine your light. And I'm just looking forward to the new spaces that you'll be able to bring fresh energy and fresh eyes and fresh hope.
Amen.
To the United Methodist Church. So thank you, Jasmine, for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. This has been a gift. It's been a gift to me. So I want to thank you for that. And I also want to remember my brother, Reverend Dr. Junius Dodson, who has been fearless leader to so many of us and really cast an undeniable, powerful, achievable vision for the future of the United Methodist Church, and who gave me hope when I was ready to give up.
Wow.
So thank you for allowing me to be here today. Thank you for this opportunity to just talk shop. And you're a blessing.
I'm trying.
And we're going to run on and see what the ends are going to be.
We keep on running. Thanks so much, Jasmine.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the episode. Bar of the Conference is produced by the team at Wesley's Revival, a ministry of Studio Wesley. Subscribe to this show on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or Google platforms so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.